bulk of the Channel 4 trade test transmissions occurred yesterday, August the 2nd. We're hoping that dealers will be busy over the next 3 months helping their viewers tune in to the new channel. Have problems already arisen, Pat?
Well, very few problems. In fact, the transmitters have come on to schedule, and in fact we've been able to improve on the original start of August the 2nd, because in fact at one time it looked as though we were going to be there at the same power and with from the same aerial, same system as the existing 3 channels. So it isn't that the fact that the Channel 4 signal is because of local standing wave patterns and things like this, but generally speaking, all the signals will be coming from the same direction. This is this great business where there were 4 channels allocated, but only 3 were then in operation. It was decided that all the transmitters would be built at the same spot and use the same aerial masts and so on. This has a great advantage for the viewer and for the dealer in the sense that only one aerial is needed. You may remember, of course, in the old days of VHF, before there was co-sighting, it was quite common to see a whole number of aerials pointing in different directions on the same house. And of course you had the band 1 large aerial and the smaller band 3 aerials as separate structures, and from an environmental point of view this was not the ideal system.
Are there any disadvantages in co-sighting?
Very few that I can think of. In fact, it does mean that the whole of the coverage, the UHF coverage, is very similar. One loses a little bit in the regional distribution. In some of the regional areas we possibly have become slightly less ideal, but on the whole, no, extremely good system, worked very well, and we think that Channel 4 will be a great success for that reason. People have got their sets, they've got their aerials. Now all they've got to do is to get their sets tuned.
The new Channel 4 TV service will be launched early in November. The first
way. And that's the ITV commercial you'll be seeing very soon in England and Scotland, urging the public to get tuned in. There's also a similar promotion in Wales for S4C. Transmitter news now, and we stay with Channel 4 for a moment. As we've already heard, 21 main stations around the country are on official trade tests. That's 1 more than we predicted last week. Stockland Hill was brought forward by a week at the...
That must be at least half the prospective. 6, Midhurst is nearing completion.
That's the theme of a series of road shows designed to help the general public to become more aware of Central's new East Midlands service. Regional news, sport and current affairs are now covered from new studios in Nottingham. And last week, Nottingham was the first of 8 towns to be visited by the roadshow over the next couple of weeks. As well as visiting television personalities, the roadshow stand included information panels giving advice on reception and locations of transmitters. And if there's still any doubt, an IBA engineer is on hand to answer queries. And the main station at Waltham...
In tonight's Look North, what a 100...
This is the Independent Broadcasting Authority. Hello again and welcome to our last bulletin of engineering announcements for 1982. In a somewhat festive broadcast this morning, we look back over the past year from the point of view of the retail trade. We also include details of the next stage of the phased shutdown of the 405 line television service.
And we have full details of the last 3 new relays of 1982 and the first one of 1983. In the Scottish television area, there's Bellanoch. In Birmingham, the Turves Green relay, to carry Central ITV's programmes and Channel 4. In Northern Ireland, the Buckner Relay for Ulster Television, and on the Cornish coast, Portreath for Television South West. But first, Pat Hawker and Paul Capell are with us again.
Well, Pat, we're coming up to Christmas and the end of the year, and we usually do a roundup of the year at this time. It's certainly been a year of doom and gloom in the economy. Is the same true, really, in the retail trade, do you think?
Well, surprisingly, no. It's been for...
The pianist in today's play school was Peter Pettinger with...
Now, from the IBA at Winchester, engineering announcements for the radio and television trade.
Hello and welcome to this week's engineering announcements for the radio and television trade. Today, a closer look at a feature of television that's less common than it used to be. John Lovell and Pat Hawker discuss the history of the test card. In transmitter news, further extensions to Channel 4 coverage, and details of two new relays. In Devon, Overton Gifford, and near Leominster, Hope under Dinmore. But first, talking to Pat Hawker, over to John Lovell.
Last month, Pat, was the 30th anniversary of the start of ITV, and next month is the 15th anniversary of the start of this programme, Engineering Announcements. I'm sure many people will have forgotten that in the early days of ITV, the amount of programming was limited, so that for long periods during the day, the test card was being broadcast.
Not only the test card, but in fact, in the very early days, before the transmitters were ready, it was the custom to have a low-power transmitter which was operated by one of the firms interested in aerials. It was a caravan and about a 1 kilowatt transmitter, and this used to put out various patterns, and these used to announce that the stations would be opening, and there would be all sorts of odd test cards and things put out, which I dare say very few of our present viewers can actually remember, but I thought we would show them one or two today.
I presume the purpose of all this was so that dealers and even viewers themselves could set up their television so that come the start of programmes they could be sure of a reasonable picture.
Indeed, but you must remember it was really quite a pioneering work, because up till that time there'd been nothing on the frequencies on band 3. This was up 200 megahertz, which was something like 5 times the higher frequency than the band 1 television to which people had become accustomed. So it was a great deal of worry as to whether people would have decent aerials and would have sets that would do this. I recall, even a couple of years later, having a converter in front of a band 1 only receiver. This was a thing called a universal converter, but my goodness, it had problems and gave you an awful lot of patterning from breakthrough of the band 1 transmissions.
Mm-hmm. I can certainly remember sort of in the late 50s test card C. This, of course, was on the old 405 line service. There seem to be many different patterns on it. Is it worth us just talking about what they actually achieved?
Test card C was certainly quite a sophisticated card, which did allow you to check the response of the receiver in many different ways. Particularly in those days, you needed to be able to check the geometry, you needed to be able to check the line pulling, sync pulling and so on, particularly the multipath, where you had these little single pulses of white or black on a background, so you could really check the performance of the receiver.
And then we came to 625 Ancolour and test card F.
Oh, and the little girl to give you the skin tones and so on. Yes, that was done a long time ago. And of course, the young lady who was, I think, the daughter of one of the BBC engineers, now grown up and married.
And now we've come to the electronic test pattern. The one...
People did complain about the absence of a circle, but on the other hand, it does give you a great deal of tests, particularly things like the pattern for convergence, although again, receivers have so changed that convergence is no longer the sort of problem it was when colour sets first came in. And also, of course, you've got the multi-burst, which shows you the response, and which does prove, unfortunately, how much cross-colour there is almost invariably due to the presence of the colour subcarriers.
Pat Hawker there, talking with John Lovell. And with very little test card now shown on ITV, except very early in the mornings, these are the times when the IBA electronic test pattern is available on Channel 4. Weekdays from 8:30 in the morning until 9, test card and tone. From 9 until 10, test card and music. From 10 until 10:45, in-vision teletext and music. And from 10:45 to 11, test card and music. This hourly cycle, starting at 10 o'clock, with 45 minutes of in-vision teletext, followed by 15 minutes of test card, is repeated, except that there's no in-vision teletext during the hour in which programmes start. On Saturday and Sunday, test card and music begin at 8:30, continuing until the start of programmes. If you'd like a copy of a leaflet describing the test card, we'll be giving you our address in a few minutes.
Transmitter news now, starting with special announcements. In the Midlands, the changeover to the new mast at Sutton Coldfield.
And now from the IBA at Winchester, engineering announcements for the radio and television trade.
Hello and welcome to the IBA's weekly announcements for the radio and television trade. Some frequency changes for local radio. A look at the new shape of the VHF band to come. In television transmitter news, extensions to Channel 4 coverage. And 3 new relays. In Devon, Dunsford, near Leominster, Hope under Dinmore, and in Staffordshire, Winds Hill. More details later.
Over the next 18 months or so, changes will take place in the VHF radio band. This will involve numbers of local radio stations changing frequency, both ILR and BBC. The reason is the 1984 Geneva Plan for Band 2. Eventually, UK broadcasters will be able to use the whole band from 88 to 108 MHz. By summer 1987, all local radio stations will be in 2 specific sub-bands, 94.6 to 97.6 MHz and 102 to 104.9 MHz. The majority of ILR stations will be located either in the upper half of the lower sub-band or in the lower half of the upper sub-band.
Most of the frequency changes will be quite small, perhaps a few hundred kilohertz. In some cases, ILR and BBC stations will actually exchange frequencies. The first changes have already taken place, and this coming Friday, 3 more are due. In Bury St Edmunds, Saxon Radio will move from 96.3 to 96.4 MHz, a shift of just 100 kilohertz. In Southend and Chelmsford, Essex Radio moves from 95.